everyone, I'm Alice, and this is Nature News, your weekly updates on nature, science, and environmental news for the week of August 28th. Now, let's start with some great news out of Africa, where Mobanza Mobembo Gerard is being sentenced to 30 years in a hard labor camp in the Congo for poaching and trafficking more than 500 elephants since 2008. Now, this is the first criminal conviction of a wildlife trafficker ever in the Congo Republic, and it's going to be a big lesson to other poachers on the seriousness this government is taking. Let's hope more African nations follow suit so we can reduce the amount of poaching and wildlife trafficking. Did you know one of the largest building-based solar arrays in the United States actually sits atop a former Pittsburgh steel mill? The building is home to a 133,000 square foot solar array, which houses a robotics nonprofit and an autonomous vehicle developer. The emission savings on this are equivalent to 62 million tons of coal. And this is pretty cool for a city that once had some of the worst air pollution in the country. There have been a few reversals out of the Trump administration this week, starting with the withdrawal of the controversial nominee to lead the Bureau of Land Management. The nominee, William Perry Pendley, has been leading the agency since last August through a series of controversial continued appointment extensions. Now, prior to his coming to Washington, D.C., the Wyoming native actually spent much of his career at a conservative Mountain States legal foundation where they challenged much of what the BLM does, and he's worked really hard to sell off public lands, so this is a really great thing to have him removed from that position. There's also been a surprise reversal in the Pebble Mine as the Army Corps of Engineers strikes down the mine and says it's going to fail to receive a permit under the Clean Water Act. Now, this is just 11 days after Donald Trump Jr. called for it to be stopped on Twitter. On August 4th, he tweeted that the headwaters of the Bristol Bay and the surrounding fishery are too unique and fragile to take any chances. Well, on Monday, he got his wish because the Army, which oversees the Corps, said the Trump administration, while they supported the mining industry for its jobs in minerals, they were worried that the project would likely result in a significant adverse effect on the aquatic systems and human environment. Now, this mine, as proposed, would actually eventually become an open pit the size of about 460 football fields, with tailings heaped on 2,800 acres behind more than 10 miles of dams. The extensive pumping and processing would be required in perpetuity to ensure that tainted drainage water never reaches Bristol Bay, which is home to the world's largest sockeye salmon run. So it's pretty good that this is not going to go through. More stuff happening in Alaska. You may remember the plan to open oil leasing in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which I talked about last week. Well, on Monday, 2 lawsuits were filed to block oil development, both from Alaska Native and environmental groups. Both suits allege that the Trump administration has violated basic environmental law. So we'll see how that plays out. If you love nature and want to hear more about how you can protect and explore it, then make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, and share this video with a friend so we can grow this community. You can share important news in your neighborhood for the next episode too by using the hashtag #NatureNews on IG or Twitter. Mangroves are disappearing due to sea level rise, but they could be the very thing that helps prevent climate change. Mangroves are one of the best coastal protectors. They protect communities and waterways from dangerous storm surge. They provide critical habitat for a variety of plants and animals, as well as providing nutrients and sediment for the seabed and coral reef systems. Now, they can also process up to 4 times more carbon out of the atmosphere than a typical forest, which was really surprising to me. So if you live in or near a coastal area, you should be working to help protect mangroves by talking to local officials and educating your community on their importance. We need to keep mangroves and not cut them down for roads, developments, or sandy beaches. Daisy Purdy is a member of the Cherokee Nation and a former roller derby player. Like many, she has been concerned for her family and for the indigenous peoples of America, and she set out to do a fundraiser by skating across America from Arizona all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, if you didn't know, Native Americans in the US have some of the worst resources of any population, with little access to clean water, electricity, and education. In Utah alone, less than 40% of the Native population has access to clean running water. They are almost always living in areas that most Americans would consider unlivable, either on oil and gas wells, near uranium mines, old Superfund and nuclear sites, or in areas of extreme conditions where living off the land is difficult, if not impossible. Now, the Cherokee once called the East Coast home. Many, however, were moved during the Trail of Tears from North Carolina and other areas to Oklahoma, Arizona, and other places out west, far from the lands they're used to. So far, Daisy has been able to raise $21,000, but her goal is $80,000. She hopes to help Native Americans get access to clean water and access to a fair living environment. You can make a donation to her GoFundMe at the link down below in the description. Remember when I told you about neonicotinoids, the insecticide, and how it affects pollinators? Well, it turns out new research also shows they affect prawns and oysters. Australia has been using more than 300 types of insecticides and fungicides with this ingredient, which has been shown to accumulate in these sea creatures and also reduce the flesh quality in prawns and the immune systems in oysters. And when people eat them, they are also infected with these neonicotinoids. Here in California, we are still battling some of the worst wildfires the state has ever seen. Now, back in 2018, you may remember the Paradise Fire, which wiped out almost an entire town. They are now beginning to rebuild in that area that has almost yearly fires, and they're finally looking at ways to protect the community by growing a green belt, much like the ones in Africa I mentioned a few weeks back. Now, by adding parkland and forest in a buffer zone, they could reduce fires by up to 64%. So let's hope this plan can be used there and in cities and towns all over the West where they are very susceptible to wildfires. Have you ever been snorkeling or scuba diving? Well, one of my favorite places for that is the country of Belize. It's home to the second largest barrier reef system in the world and some of the most intact coral reefs, and its protected areas just got bigger. In August, they enacted an expansion of the Sapodilla Cay Marine Reserve to be 7 times bigger than its former size, as well as a plan to phase out gill netting by 2022, which harms turtles, sharks, dolphins, and other marine creatures. Before China declared giant pandas a protected species in 1962, hunters in pursuit of the black and white bear used dogs to track them. Now, since then, measures have been put in place to protect the vulnerable pandas. But more than half a century later, dogs, well, they're still jeopardizing their safety. According to a group of researchers that included Drexel's James Spatia, PhD, the group found that the dogs are still menacing giant pandas, in part because nature reserves in China are often so closely connected to human settlements where dogs roam free. And dogs can roam over 10 kilometers in a night, and some of these dogs have been setting up permanent residence in the reserves and really putting a lot of pressure on this vulnerable species. If you're looking for something to watch this weekend, check out Night on Earth, Shot in the Dark on Netflix. It's a look into wildlife after dark, where camera crews climbed, dove, and froze to capture the animals and insects that thrive during evening hours when the rest of the world is fast asleep. From the ocean to the jungle to the mountains, this groundbreaking footage shows the hidden side of our planet's greatest landscapes, and I think you're gonna really enjoy it. Well, that's all I have for you this week. If you've got some nature news or a concern you want to share, leave me a comment down below, or you can tweet me or DM me on Instagram using the hashtag #NatureNews. And don't forget to check out some of these other videos before you go.